I wanted to kick this off, Grant, but by introducing yourself, but I don't think I can do justice. So why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us your origin story, where you grew up, and bringing us to the moment of the inception of the idea of Gamma.
Do these mics work?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thanks. Thanks for having me. This is awesome. Really appreciate you all showing up, and hopefully can share a little bit about our journey. I'm the co-founder, one of the co-founders and CEO of Gamma. I actually grew up in the Bay Area. I went to school not too far from here for college, and then before Gamma, had spent sort of 10 plus years in startup world. So I had started mostly actually in the finance and operations realm, became the sort of interim CFO at a startup called Optimizely, which at the time was one of the fastest growing YC companies. Got to see kind of that chapter go from 10 million in ARR to 100 million in ARR when I left. Ended up joining a much earlier stage startup, a 5-person startup called ClearBrain. It was in the predictive analytics space, and I was a COO there, led sales and marketing, and really started to kind of go beyond just the core operations function at that startup. We ended up hitting 1 million in ARR, and then was acquired by Amplitude, so in the public sort of analytics company in the analytics space. And then 5 years ago, started Gamma. A lot of this was kind of trying to solve our own pain point around trying to help people communicate their ideas. We are oftentimes stuck in slides, trying to format your ideas in a very sort of constrained 16 by 9 box, and we always felt like there's got to be a better way. And so 5 years later, we're making good progress, but still early in the grand scheme of things. And again, hopefully going to be able to share some of the pain points and things we sort of endured through on our journey. And I know there are a lot of builders here, and so just want to be as helpful as possible.
Love it. Grant, tell us about you identify a pain point, which is I have to express a view on this 16 by 9 format. It's there's a lot of constraints. I want to be more creative, or I wanted to do it much more easily. What was the first few discussions with your co-founders were like as you guys were honing in on this is what we want to build?
Yeah. I'd start by saying, this pain point was sort of simmering in the back of my head for probably almost 2 decades. I started my career in consulting and investment banking, so you're living in slide decks. I never thought I'd go on to try to create a product in this category, but it was a pain I suffered. When after the last startup I was at, ClearBrain was acquired, I ended up going back into advising and consulting early stage startups. So it was one night when I was trying to prepare for a meeting the next day, and I was sitting there trying to just resize this box so that I could get the slide to look half decent so I could go into the meeting and not looking like I didn't do any work, right? I wanted to look polished, wanted to look nice, but it was just this feeling like I was wasting so much time, 90% of the time, just trying to format the slide rather than the content itself or really the story that I'm trying to convey, and that just felt broken. So with that initial idea, I was like, okay, I'm gonna talk to 2 of my former colleagues. They were actually still at Optimizely, the startup we worked at together, and we said, hey, why don't we just try to tinker, for a bit, nights and weekends. Let's try to prove to ourselves we can do something interesting in this space. So it actually took us 4 or 5 months. We ended up tinkering a bunch. Over that period of time, started building conviction that actually there's something different that we can really, really introduce here. We took that prototype that we had built and we used that as our pitch deck. So instead of using Google Slides as our pitch deck, we took the prototype. It was the first time I've ever presented to investors using something that wasn't slides, but as our proof point that, hey, we felt like even though this is an early proof of concept, we feel like it's going to be special and hopefully a reason for you to invest.
That's incredible. Was that the aha moment you realized you had something tangible and very valuable?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, one of the things I think as a founder, and I'm a first-time founder, what you realize is that there's often not necessarily this one magical aha moment. It's what your job is to do is you want to build conviction every single step of the way. You're going to go out and it's going to be super daunting to say, I'm going to create a brand new product, try to build a business. That's too much. You don't try to even think about product market fit on day one. You think about what is the one step I can take forward to at least make sure that I'm spending time doing something that feels valuable to me, that energizes me, hopefully with a team that also gives you energy. And that sort of conviction has been, from day one, even as we're tinkering, is like every day we come back together, we still feel energized, we still feel like we have something of value to add, and then come back to that. And so definitely when we eventually, pitched our idea and raised some money, that gave us like at least an ability to say, okay, we can actually start assembling a team. But of course, it was still this feeling like, hey, there's still a lot more to prove. Let's continue to build conviction.
Yeah. One of the hardest things to fight against is your muscle memory or consumer behavior. And you had almost like 40 plus years of consumer behavior and muscle memory built in. But for all of us, we all go to default to slides and we all default to PowerPoint, especially if you're in if you're PM and consulting roles, there's obviously you'll go there. And I think I haven't seen any other product like break that barrier better than Gamma. The first time I used it with a single line prompt, the output that you got was near perfect to what the story that I wanted to tell. Were there moments of doubt that most VCs will advise you, most product leaders will advise you, don't go against the grain when it comes to behavior? How did you convince yourself?
So many moments of doubt. I'll start by just sharing the quick story of when I talked about first trying to fundraise. So this is peak pandemic. I was living in London at the time. We had moved there for my wife's job, and trying to line up all of these pitches. First-time founder, and we're doing all this over Zoom because nobody's meeting in person. And being in London, all my, prospective investors were all in the U.S. And so I would, tuck my kids into bed at 8 p.m. And then from 8 p.m. to 2 a.m., I'd line up all of my investor pitches back to back to back to back. And so I'd be in many, many hours of pitches. The very first day of pitching, I do my first two. They actually go pretty well. I'm like, okay, man, this isn't so hard. This is, I'm pretty good at this. I get to my third pitch, 20 minutes in, finish the pitch, and I pause, waiting for questions, and there's a bit of a wait, and the investor basically says, "This has got to be the worst idea I've ever heard. Not only are you going up against massive incumbents, they have ultimate distribution. There is no way you're ever going to succeed." And in my head, you're kind of in shock at that point. And I'm thinking okay, well, at least come up with a smart rebuttal. And before I could say anything, he leaves the Zoom call. And so I'm stuck there thinking, okay, well, I literally got up from my seat, trying to think about, okay, well, I have 5 more minutes before my next pitch. Collect yourself. And in that moment, I sort of internalized this feeling that actually what he said is right. What we're doing is entering a category that's super hard. It is going to be hard. We're facing teams and products that have great distribution, so you almost have to bake in some form of distribution into your product. And in our case, that came in the form of how can you build a product that has word of mouth, that has organic virality, and internalize how difficult that's going to be, and not assume that just building a great product is going to solve everything else. And so we kind of internalized it. You also, as a founder, have to have just short-term memory. You're going to hear many, many no's, and you just prepare for the next meeting.
How's that investor doing now?
Won't name names. And
of course. One of the most fascinating things about Gamma to me was that I found about Gamma before I found about ChatGPT. You guys have been experimenting with generative models and AI even before ChatGPT was cool, and you grew up with them. Can you talk a little bit about how you started thinking of product as an AI first product? What were some early decisions, and then how the evolution has been?
Yeah. So yeah, we definitely started before obviously this recent wave of AI craziness, and we were fortunate. I think a lot of the product principles we had from day one, which is we want to focus on speed and simplicity. We want to make it dead simple for anybody to get what's in their head and be able to express that. So we had those from day one. We're fortunate that AI has helped accelerate all of that, has made it easier to deliver on speed and simplicity. We actually first recognized sort of the ChatGPT moment, we were playing around with Stable Diffusion, and for us, that was the moment we realized, okay, something interesting is happening. You can now visualize things like images, okay, this is way simpler, right? And you're sort of democratizing access to things that weren't possible before. So when that moment happened, we realized we have to stay close to this. Then, of course, ChatGPT moment. And then we basically, early 2023, we spent 4 months heads down just re-architecting the entire onboarding flow of our product to make that first 30 seconds as magical as possible.
Yeah.
And when we eventually launched, end of March 2023, that was our initial sort of inflection point.
Talk more about that first 30 seconds. I think that's the most inspiring story I read on your LinkedIn as well,
Yeah.
and how important and pivotal that was for Gamma.
Yeah, so I'll rewind basically a little bit, which is in August 2022, this is pre-AI, we actually launched on Product Hunt. This was when we first went public beta. So we launched on Product Hunt. Our product actually won Product of the Day, Product of the Week, Product of the Month, and it felt really good. We're like, we did something special, we did it. We saw a huge spike in signups, and then signups plateaued. And I think one of my number one rules, or one of the top rules I have for founders is, just don't lie to yourself. It's easy for you to not be lied to by, for you not to be kind of tricked by others, but it's really easy to trick yourself. And it's easy to trick yourself into thinking you might have product market fit. Winning product of the month on Product Hunt feels really good. But when you see a spike in signups and then signups sort of plateau, you realize you don't have a product that has organic virality.
Yeah.
It means that people aren't telling all of their friends and colleagues and family members to go try your product. So you kind of are in a fork in the road. You can say, okay, maybe we'll invest a ton in marketing and advertising, and we'll just brute force our way through top of the funnel and then continue to grow that way. But that would have been lying to ourselves. So we chose path B, which is let's figure out for any new user that comes in, how can we delight them enough in the first 30 seconds so that we earn the next 30 seconds, and then the next 30 seconds, and then they go on and tell their friends about our product. What can we do? And it was all hands on deck. Everybody focused on just making that first 30 seconds magical. We gave ourselves 4 months to do that. And that's really when, once we launched it, there was that inflection point. First day, you have like 5,000 signups. Then the next day, you have like 10,000 signups. Then 20,000 signups. Then 30,000 signups a day. And that's without any sort of marketing, any advertising, purely word of mouth and organic growth.
That is crazy. Models have evolved since you started. Everyone has the same models, and most products can come across as a wrapper built on top of a language model or something else. How do you stay relevant? This is not just for Gamma, but for all of us who are building in the age of AI. How do you stay relevant and find your moat or differentiation in a highly commoditized and undifferentiated world?
Part of this starts well before you even get into model selection, which is choose a problem that really consumes you, that you feel like you want to work on for a long, long, long time. Because that will give you a chance to do all these subsequent things, which is, okay, now that you're committed to doing that, one of the things we did early on, and we come, a lot of our team comes from a company called Optimizely. So experimentation has been very core to how we do everything. We designed Gamma in a way such that we knew different models would advance in different ways, and our ability to be able to experiment constantly, test across, both closed and open source, and the combination of being able to really just orchestrate all this in the background. It's invisible work to the end user, but it can still be valuable. If you're able to commit to doing that over and over and over again, then you have a chance of accumulating and compounding some of this value and this knowledge, and then hopefully over time delivering on a product that's actually more and more valuable. So for us, we're anticipating that things would change. It's impossible to keep up with just advancements across models, but if you can try to almost turn that to your own advantage by architecting your own product in a way that is set up for that, then you have a better chance of hopefully being able to just ride that wave for a long time.
Incredible. There are two topics I wanted to explore with you, which I think you're the world's best at. I obsessively follow your post. The first is about go-to-market and growth. We'll come to that. But I wanted to talk a little bit about team and culture, which I personally learned a lot from you about. One of my favorite posts that you wrote is that it's easy to recover from a bad product decision or product market fit. It's really hard to recover from a bad hire. Talk to me about how you build that philosophy. And of course, thank you for sharing it with the world. But as all of us are early in our journeys. What are some of the hiring decisions that you took pretty early on with Gamma, along with your co-founders, that led to the success? And then, like in the same post, you go on to articulate that like much later, which is with 50 employees, you were generating $100 million in revenue. That's $2 million ARR per employee. That's astounding. Talk to me about team and culture, and then like leading to like how your views have evolved and changed as you're now experiencing tremendous growth.
Yeah, there's sort of two things that I think sometimes founders feel like they want to rush or like just are eager to get over with. One of those is oftentimes like choosing your founders, and the other is like choosing your investors. Sometimes the temptation is to speed date through that and meet a lot of people, meet someone you feel like is good enough, and then start building. And similarly with investors, like, oh, I'm going to go fundraise, so I'm going to, in this 2-week period, meet as many new investors as possible, pick one, and then go on. Both of those, in my opinion, are very costly decisions if you get wrong. And if there's going to be a costly decision to get it wrong, then you should definitely try to pump the brakes and go as slowly as possible. Choosing founders in particular, and I mean, it seems obvious, but this is equivalent to choosing your life partner. You're going to be, in a good case scenario, if the company works out, stuck with them for a long time. And so do you want to spend time with them? Are you energized by working with them? We had to prove that for ourselves. I knew John and James from Optimizely, so we're friends. But it's like one thing to be friends, and it's another thing to actually be business partners, to be founders. And so going back to like the founding story, we spent 4 or 5 months working on Gamma, the prototype, not because we were getting paid or not because we had to, but because we liked it. And every time we worked together, we felt like there was good energy, super complementary in skill sets. You don't want to have 2 founders or 3 founders that all have the same background or same skill set or same point of view. Because it's like having a basketball team and having 2 centers, right? Like you have to be able to have a team that can play to different strengths. And we only recognize that by building together for that 4 or 5 months. Actually, we are pretty complementary and also very energized by working together. So that was, I think, for us, like choice one we made, take that super slow. And then the other, decision then was beyond the first 3, then we hired our first, ended up being the first 12 of us. The temptation often is like you start getting some traction, you just want to hire very fast. Like, oh, hiring is going to help us move faster. And in my experience, that's never been the case. Hiring never helps you move faster. It might make you more durable in different ways, but it slows down everything. So we had this mantra early on is we're going to hire painfully slow. There will be things that feel like they're breaking, and that's okay. We're going to take it slow. We want to make sure the first 12 employees, they're the DNA of your company. As you scale, you're trying to replicate that DNA. You want the next 12 to share the same values, the same mindset, the same principles as that first 12. And if you don't have that, if you don't even have what you consider to be like the standard of excellence, then you're going to be super wishy-washy by letting anybody in as you continue to scale. So take the early part of that journey super slow. Don't rush it, and make sure you keep that bar high. Whatever your definition of like a standard of excellence, like keep that as high as possible, and then let yourself grow sort of organically over time.
And how has it evolved since you are now 50 plus people?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, the first 12 I mentioned, all 12 are still with the company today. We're 5 years in. I don't know public stats around like employee attrition, but I would probably say, if I were to guess, we're 99th percentile. We've lost a couple folks, some to start their own business, but we've lost very, very few over the 5 years. And I do attribute that a lot to the sort of culture we try to have, where we give space for teammates to learn and grow. Part of the benefit of staying small and lean as long as possible is there's more work to be done, and everybody has a chance to grow into a bigger role. You're not making up work for them. So their work inherently feels rewarding. And if you happen to also hire people that want to be on that journey of growth and learning and feeling like they have a high impact, then it ends up becoming a very virtual cycle of you hire people, they onboard, they love being there, they contribute even more because of how committed they are to the journey.
As you grow, communication gets tougher. There are a lot of rituals and weekly things that you do with a small group of people that now needs to be expanded upon. How has those things impacted as you have a much larger team now, and particularly how how's that positively or somewhat negatively impacted your product velocity?
Yeah, definitely gets harder as you grow. I think as a founding team, you should think about what your non-negotiables are. For us three founders, one of our non-negotiables is we meet, just the three of us, twice a week. And it's a chance for us to just really share anything that's sort of on our mind. We have a saying, which is don't let things fester, right? Like if you have something you're worried about, you feel underwater, you feel amount of stress or pressure, like you should be talking about that. And collectively as a founding team, then we're going to try to figure it out. Like nobody should feel like the whole sort of burden of a problem is on them to solve alone. And so we've had that. In 5 years, I can count on one hand how many of those meetings we've missed, right? That's a non-negotiable every single week. 2 times a week, we're meeting, we're talking about those things. It allows us to make sure like those problems don't go unsaid. At a company level, every week we have what's called show and tell, which is anybody in the company can go up to the front of the company and basically present on anything they're working on. It could be an update to a project, a customer conversation, and try to just educate us on something that seems important and to share it. We really value transparency, and so we encourage everybody to do that. And again, that's something that happens every single week. Anybody at the company can get up and do that, and you stay committed to doing that. And so those are the small things. You try to instill these small habits that over time will probably evolve, but at least if you have that in place and it's core to your DNA, then as you evolve, it feels like, okay, what else might we add or how might we complement this? But you have some good foundational work already in place.
Incredible. Let's talk a little bit about growth. You talked about the most important aspect, which was the first 30 seconds and creating the most amazing, delightful experience. I see you as someone who is one of the best growth marketers anywhere, and you have deployed so many things. You have done founder-led growth the way it is supposed to be done. You have built not just a brand for Gamma, but a brand for yourself. And then there are other numerous channels, including leading this beautiful rebrand that you recently did. One of my favorites rebrand. A lot of people do rebrands, but they're meaningless. But when I saw your post, I could tell how much time and effort and thoughtfulness has went into it. So 2-part question. First is beyond this 30 seconds of delightful user experience, what are some of the other channels or tactics you deployed? And then second, as you were thinking about building a brand for yourself as for Gamma, what was your mental calculus?
Yeah, so part of this is going back to the hiring painfully slow. We didn't have a marketing team early on, and I am not a marketer by background. So a finance guy trying to run marketing is usually not a great idea. And so I needed to basically educate myself on what would it take to build out a marketing team. Before I hired our first marketer, I wanted to make sure I knew what I was even looking for. And so we started seeing creator marketing and influencer marketing working pretty well. And so I really wanted to just get deeper into how can we scale up, even just that single channel. One way of doing that is just trying to become a creator myself. I need to be able to, in order to have deeper empathy for what it takes to be a good creator, let's put myself out there. I'm going to post on LinkedIn. I'm going to post on X. And just understand, even to create something that can be engaging and valuable to an audience, what does that take? So I started there. Then as we started onboarding creators, I recognized that I didn't want to outsource that work. It's very tempting to be find somebody else. They interface with all the creators. They onboard creators. I wanted to be the one that onboarded creators because I wanted to make sure that they understood the value of our product. And I wanted to actually show them so that they could see the aha moment, that they could be someone that could actually be a user of the product and understand why it was special, and then be able to turn our story and translate that into a way that was compelling to their audience, right? And so I would manually onboard every creator, sit down with them, ideate. We would riff on ideas. I would try to understand, what makes a good hook? How do they think about that? It would also help me better understand how I could create my own content in a more compelling way. And so that was the initial flywheel. And I think that allowed me to then, when we eventually hired our first growth marketer, head of growth marketing, I knew what questions to ask. Because before that, I had no idea what it looked like. I would just be left to maybe looking at someone's resume and they worked at company X. That seems interesting. Maybe I'll just hire them because they seem to have a good resume. I think that's usually a trap because oftentimes those skills aren't even transferable. What you might need for your company to grow, and marketing is such a broad field, like you need to understand like what are the things that actually move the needle for you. I think you can only do that if you are sort of like serving as like reconnaissance. You're going out, doing the job first, seeing how hard it is, and then going out and then finding someone that can do the job better than you. And your goal is not to become the expert in that, but your goal is to understand it enough so you know what an expert looks like.
Wow. How do you balance that? Like, you're still the CEO of the company, you're the marketing for the company, you're building your own brand. There's so much time and energy it takes. Talk to me, like, tell us about your personal routine. What do you do when you wake up, and how do you manage so much of work that you do?
Part of this is you're never really turning it off. You're constantly thinking about things. Every free minute I have is spending time with our customers. Mm-hmm. So we have like our own separate sort of Gambassador Slack like we call our power users like ambassadors, and they have a Slack group, and I try to interface with them. So it's like trying to understand how we can provide value. Going back to one of the things I said around like if you find a problem that consumes you and gives you energy, then everything else actually becomes easier because it doesn't feel like work. Like I love thinking about these problems. I love trying to help our customers and our users. And so if you can be energized by it, then you're constantly just doing it because you actually like it. The reason I actually end up doing more and more content is because I actually really love trying to pay it forward to other builders because I know how hard it is. I know what it's like to be on the receiving end of someone saying your idea is dumb or is the worst idea they've heard. And if I can save others any of the sort of heartache or heartburn that I've had, that to me is actually rewarding. Again, that gives me energy. So I try to put more stuff out there so that I can actually connect with other builders. I see myself oftentimes as like other founders' biggest cheerleader because I honestly want them to succeed, and I find that valuable when I can see somebody doing what they love, being inspired by that work, and like going in and actually like trying to change something. That to me is just ultimately great.
Incredible. All right, let's have some fun. Quick answers. First instinct, whatever comes to your mind. Here we go. Best piece of advice you've received as a founder?
I'd say maybe it's more of like a saying, which is if you're not embarrassed by the person you were a year ago, then you're not growing fast enough. Yeah. And so, just try to keep that in mind.
And what's the most overrated startup advice you get?
Hiring is going to help you move faster.
One book or resource that you generally found useful?
I have a lot of books I like for different things. I think for pre-product market fit companies, the one I go back to is just Shoe Dog by Phil Knight, founder of Nike, because it really is about like, again, finding that category that he believes so much in, and he like literally bleeds this, and he was an athlete before. That translates into the product. So I love, that's one that inspired me.
Cool. If you couldn't work on Gamma, what will you be doing?
I think I would be trying to help other founders pursue their dreams in some way. Pre-Gamma, I was doing startup consulting, and so I enjoy that. I probably would try to do that in some shape or form.
If you can have dinner with any founder, dead, alive, alien, who will you have dinner with?
I was lucky enough to be in the audience when Steve Jobs gave his commencement speech. And that was like, to me, like a moment, you go back and just watch. And every stage of your life, you can go back and watch that and maybe glean something different. Because like when you're 20 years old, you just maybe don't even have the mental capacity to really appreciate any of that. But for sure, the ability to be able to sit down and pick his brain, like obviously one of the greatest builders of all time would be amazing.
That inspired me to start a company. That was such a good speech. Best dollar you've spent while building Gamma? What's your best ROI, dollar for dollar?
Oh, that's really hard. I mean, one of our first dollars in was our first office, which was a converted 2-bedroom apartment, and
Love it.
I think that is the definition of where scrappiness came from. It's like when we called an all hands, it was literally calling people into one bedroom, and doing our meeting there. So it honestly was like dead cheap at that time too. It was right during the pandemic. I think we paid like $2,000 per month or something ridiculous in San Francisco. Wow. And it was like, okay, this is a worthwhile probably use of capital right now.
Yeah, if it's available, I'll take it.
Yeah.
And the worst dollar?
Worst dollar. I don't know. That one's hard. I mean, we spend money constantly to experiment. And I think those, in my mind, even if it's a failed dollar, it's a dollar used to learn. And so, I don't know. I can't think of anything off the top of my head.
Give me 3 products you admire. Doesn't have to be tech outside of Gamma.
Ooh, 3 products I admire.
Nike can be one of them.
Yeah, I mean, Nike for sure. Again, obviously, really just what it means to the person, the athlete. I mean, there's a handful of AI companies I am super impressed by. I think what 11 Labs is doing, just as like a product and a platform, very, very hard to do well. They're very inspiring. I've met their founders before, and amazing team. Granola for Notes has been amazing. I go back to even kind of startups sort of pre the sort of AI wave. Founders like Dylan at Figma, Melanie at Canva, you have Ivan at Notion. These founders have been building for over a decade now.
Yeah.
And going back to they're consumed by the problem. I admire what they've been doing for so long now, staying committed, staying passionate about it, building an amazing product, amazing team. That's so hard to do. There has been, unfortunately, like this wave recently of certain AI startups where founders, at the end of the day, seem actually more like mercenaries than they were missionaries, and so have gone off to chase a big, shiny check and then left a shell of a company behind. And so I really admire people that have done it for now 10, 12, 13, 14 years and have stuck with the company and really built a amazing community around them.
In that spirit, where do you think Gamma or presentations or content will be in 5 years? What do you think will happen?
Yeah, I mean, our long-term aspiration is to help become the sort of vehicle for storytelling, for visual communication, to help people take what's in their head and communicate those ideas. And so we're just getting started. For us, storytelling is this timeless trait, right? You can map it all the way back to early humankind, and it's like we want to be able to really help change that and continue to augment that. I don't think our work is obviously even close to being remotely done. We started off in sort of this more narrowly defined presentation space, and I think over time we'll try to really define a whole new category.
Phenomenal. I'd love to just keep asking you so many more questions that I have. But I do want to open up to the audience. There's so many of us that a lot of you will have questions. I'll pass the mic along. We do have a hard stop with Grant at 7:30, so be mindful of that. We have about, let's call it 20 minutes of Q&A time. Who wants to go first? Just easier to get to.
Thank you. Hi, Grant. I'm sure I work on Google on multimodal. First of all, I really love your product. I started using Gamma since 2023.
Appreciate it. Yeah.
And I've seen one of the amazing things I see on Gamma is that it changes so quickly. I think every 2 months or 3 months, I see the homepage becomes different. Yeah, and with a lot of new features that I love. So my question is, I think as we're seeing more and more multimodalities in the content creations, and also how helpful and how advanced the techniques has become, and how helpful it is in the interactions. I wonder what's Gamma's take or strategy on incorporating more multimodal materials or creations on that.
Great question.
Yeah, great question. It's definitely something we're thinking a lot about. Our approach has always been, there's always a temptation to just chase shiny new things, and we oftentimes, try to at least take the first step of understanding like what problem are we trying to solve. Can we dog food some version of this? We prototype a ton. A lot of things don't make it to the light of day until much later because we'll dog food things internally. We are heavy, not surprisingly, heavy Gamma users. And then things that end up becoming interesting, we oftentimes share with early community members, so I mentioned our power users, and we then say, okay, we're going to give you access to this. We're not going to tell you necessarily to use it, but we're going to give you access, and then let's see if they actually use it or not, right? Going back to the shiny syndrome, the shiny object syndrome, is like oftentimes you think something's so cool because the technology is impactful, but maybe the market's just not ready for it. And like part of your role is that you can educate the market to a certain extent, but behavior change itself is very, very hard. So you want to see where things organically start getting picked up, and hopefully your early community can be some like early test of like, is this interesting or not? We then do a lot of like customer research, talk to them, like understand if, what parts of it are actually valuable or not. And so multimodal for sure, I think there's going to be so much we can play with there, and it's all about like which parts do we try to integrate today versus 4 or 5 years down the road.
Yeah, so it's also a matter of how the timing of the market being mature.
Yeah.
Right?
And is the market even ready for what you want to ship?
Yeah, I think the big tech companies can help you educate
Totally.
users.
Yeah.
All right, one question, Brigitte. That's good.
Grant. Is it here?
Yes, go ahead.
Hi, I listened to a podcast from September, and I understand that you started API integration. So I'm wondering what's your view on API integration, and how do you balance API integration, B2B sales with organic individual customer growth?
Totally.
Does it add value to like your existing customers? How do you see the help? How does it contribute to the customers? And also, because Gamma is so successful and it really truly is the best in the category, so when you go for like B2B integration, does it really help because you already have many existing customers within the organization?
Yeah, great question. So both API and B2B, for us, we started off as more of a prosumer business, PLG. As we expand, this sort of B2B motion API are really important. Going back to like our own aspiration, we want to become a new standard for communication. And so today, default, PowerPoint or like, PDF, these are all standards. Can we become something that is in that same class? And when you think about every corner of the world, can people benefit from using Gamma? If you're just a prosumer tool, then you have not broken into businesses. You haven't earned the right to become anything close to becoming a new standard. So B2B is really important to us. We do benefit a lot from a lot of individual users, like having that bottom-up love of the product. And so then when we go into a much larger account, they already have so many Gamma users, we can then talk about, okay, how do we consolidate some of that usage and bring it to wall across the entire organization. So we want to do that. It's a long game. You have to keep investing in it. We think of API as also somewhat related because in many of our companies, customers, they have end users using Gamma. They also have functions like go-to-market that want to automate a lot of content creation. They may not even want their AEs or salespeople to go in and make edits. They just want to arm their AEs with good content. API can power a lot of that. So if you already have templates set up, you already have a lot of your theme, your brand, everything's already set up, you can then power a lot of content creation via your API. And then what you've created is sort of this rising tide development. As the prosumer product gets better, the API product gets better, and both can be independent monetization streams. And we feel like that gives us a chance to actually build a new type of standard, also just makes us much more durable. And so, yeah, we'll constantly invest in both.
Giant.
Hi, Grant.
Hey.
My name is Giant. I'm a founder of a company, first-time founder as well, 3 years in.
Nice.
So my company builds a product that's like an analyst for business teams. You can bring your own data and you can get insights, build presentations, things like this. My question to you is, we started out as me and my co-founder doing founder-led sales. We came out of stealth in July. One of the things that has become very clear is, in order to grow with the funding we have, we do need to embrace product-led growth. The question to you is, while we were doing founder-led sales, one of the key questions we needed to answer is who is our ICP? Because to operationalize a human sales force, we needed that.
Yep.
How relevant is that in PLG? And if it's relevant, what form does it actually take?
Yeah, great question. Certain products, they're more horizontal in nature, like ours. It can be a trap early on to overemphasize ICP. It's like, oh, are you building for a sales team? Or are you building for a marketing team? We always talked about, rather than focus on persona, we're going to focus on pain points. Like, what are universal pain points we can solve? Because slides are used by everybody. And some people love being able to control every single pixel. If you're a designer, it's probably, that's part of your core role. A lot of people, the formatting, the aligning of boxes, that is a pain point. And so we were trying to really solve that part of that pain point for that really broad set of users. This is only possible, though. I'd say there's one thing I would just consider as you're thinking about this is the thing you're solving for before you even think about things like product market fit, you want to think about, is your problem addressing a habit? It can be a habit forming sort of solution. A habit, James Clear calls this, basically a habit is a recurring solution to a recurring problem. And you can only have a recurring solution if the problem itself is a recurring problem. Not everybody might have data or analyst needs, and maybe there is a limited pool of people. For us, we felt like there was enough people that did have daily or weekly need of like creating a presentation, so it was a recurring problem, and we could become a recurring solution. So I think it's important to ask, like, if that pain point, if that habit isn't like something that is very, very widespread, it's going to be hard for you to build something that has PLG motion, that has word of mouth, because there's just not enough people to tell, not often enough, right? And so then if it's really tailored to a very specific audience, then it requires just a whole different way of thinking about the problem and what type of product you want to build.
Thank you so much.
Phenomenal. We have a few questions from our audience who is watching you virtually. Lauren Green says, you talked about the first 30 seconds and organic growth, but can you say more about how you got your first user, or say your first 1,000 users? That's a great question.
Yeah. So first couple users, you basically are trying to convince any of your friends that has ever used PowerPoint to come use your product. And what I quickly learned is that friends are very eager to sign up for your product, but they will lie to you. They will tell you how good it is, and then you'll go look at the usage metrics, and nobody's coming back. So we realized, okay, well, friends aren't a really good, like you can get your first 100, maybe 1,000 from people you've worked with before, but it's a terrible way to like try to get real feedback. So then we said, okay, we're just gonna make things public. We launched on Product Hunt. We basically announced our public beta, and that's where we got our first 1,000 real users, and we could also track their usage, and the pocket of users that came back, that's where you can start sensing if there's some real magic or not.
Love that. One more question, then we'll go back to the room. Deepthi Kulkarni asked, hi Grant, I'm building a birthday party concierge for parents where usage is episodic, not daily. How did you think about designing for value and retention in infrequent but high stress moments? Thanks. Also, totally love Gamma.
Thanks. Maybe I'll give an unsatisfactory answer, which is I would go back to what I was saying earlier. Is that a problem that is going to be habit forming or not? Birthdays are very episodic. Even worse, the consumer of that product is going to graduate from your product, so there's already baked in churn no matter how great your product is. And I would ask, how married are you to that problem before really thinking about anything else?
Go ahead.
Hi, Grant. Sanket from Google. I have a question. Basically, you talked a lot about how you went about with like more like organic growth, where essentially like word of mouth. So I can totally understand how you let individual users. Curious to know, like, how did you define the pricing strategy, not just for the individual user, but now when you're talking to teams and organizations, because now it becomes a slightly different animal. What were your thoughts? What did you try? What did you eventually, come to, which led you to the strategy that you picked?
Yeah, pricing and packaging. So we were sort of thrust into having to figure out pricing and packaging. I mentioned March 2023, we launched on we did our AI launch, and all of a sudden we saw this extreme amount of usage. We had this sort of freemium model, so like every new user gets a certain amount of AI credits, and then when you run out, we didn't actually have a plan for what happened when you ran out. We were like, okay, we'll worry about that later. We really quickly, basically our intercom, our chat support was basically, number one question was, how do I buy more credits? And so we had to really quickly figure out, okay, what are we going to do? And we ended up running a few different pricing surveys. We ran our own Van Westendorp to try to understand like willingness to pay in general. We landed on a few different price points, and ultimately I think the conclusion was actually, even though the price point ended up being roughly in the sort of $20 per month price range, we were probably overcomplicating by running this Van Westendorp. It was mostly because people are anchored by what other products cost. ChatGPT, like everybody was already paying for that what does that cost? And that's kind of what you're going to have to be able to pay, like either be way cheaper than that or kind of anchor yourself somewhere in that price range. And so for better or worse, the broader market oftentimes is going to dictate people's willingness to pay. Early on, what you really want to just prove, obviously, as a founder, is like if you have product market fit, are people even willing to pay for the product? So we did that, and then over time, we've sort of tested different dials, and certainly the product gets more and more sophisticated. So you're trying to figure out like what do you bundle within like your cheaper plans or sort of more expensive plans. As we've gone now into B2B, it's an ongoing conversation. We have a starting point around what we want customers to pay. We have indication from the market whether or not there is appetite at that price point, and we're constantly learning. If there isn't, like how do we adjust the dials? Early traction is good, but like as you go after the mass market, like how does that going to translate? I think most founders probably think like pricing and packaging is a set it forget it sort of thing. Honestly, I think it's a thing you're probably visiting twice a year, if not more, and having a willingness to sort of make sure you're setting yourself up for future success is something we're trying to think about.
Hi, I'm George. I have a product question. I built a homepage for Google Cloud. I quit Google to pursue my own company, Social Data. And my question is, what was the most minimal product update or enhancement or milestone that you made for Gamma that began giving you word of mouth traction?
Yeah, what is the most minimal thing? I mean, the most impactful really was when we went back and just tried to change the new user experience, the first 30 seconds. Because before that, it was honestly a very similar product. We didn't fundamentally change, when we think about like the building blocks of the product, they were all the same. They all existed before the sort of moment that we went back and we came in with the sort of lens of, as a new user, how do I deliver you magic, like some sort of feeling of like, I have to tell somebody because it actually changes my perception of what this category, what it means to create a presentation. I think that was for us, like everything else beyond that, after that, has been like, yeah, of course, like incremental improvements and changes, but just the realization that if we can make that first 30 seconds feel magical, then we've earned the right to actually have like a conversation with this customer, like build this relationship with the customer. It's not going to be relevant for every category. Like certain products, there is no, it may not be possible to deliver 30 seconds of magic, but you can always try to remove friction. You can always try to condense, like really try to pare down that timeline as much as possible, and then also just try to give the end user or the customer some level of feeling that every time they invest a minute in your product, they get more than a minute back, right? Like they're going to come back to your product the next time, and it's going to be slightly better. Like that's hopefully the promise you can give to your customers.
Hi, Grant. Rakesh Kumar with AWS. My question is on GTM. Very few companies have managed to move from a B2C to a B2B, but you have done a pretty good job. So as you look to scale more into B2B, how should your GTM function evolve over the next few years?
Yeah, how should the GTM function evolve? We're still figuring it out. We're early days. I think one thing we know is that the sort of prosumer and the sort of PLG motion, that's sort of the core growth engine, right? Like if we can find our ways into like these organizations and there's already end users that love the product, that definitely makes things easier. We have a chance to then really go into these conversations where we're not really trying to convince them per se. We're just trying to figure out the structure or the sort of texture of a deal and work that way. So it's made things easier, but it's also highly competitive. And so part of what we have to be able to do is just be adaptable and build our sales team in hopefully just a different way. We're constantly thinking about providing value to our customers well before we ever talk commercials or talk anything around like pricing. And if we can do that, hopefully we can build that trust over a long time horizon.
Richard here. Long-time PM, I have a startup in productivity. In the market where visual storytelling, like I have a lot of product manager friends that used to build a lot of PowerPoints. Today, they're building something in VS Code and called Claude, and this is the prototype they're showing their engineers. How do you think of like the evolution of presentation, the visual storytelling in the context of the ability to build things beyond a PowerPoint deck.
Yeah, yeah, it's a great point. Our vision of presentations, was never to be AI slides or like to be incrementally better slideware. So even from the very beginning, we built Gamma in a way that was trying to predict or project like the future of work. So, when you create something in Gamma, it's mobile friendly by default. So you can share it, someone can open it on their phone or their tablet, they can, scroll through it. It was intended to be interactive. So it's not just, next slide please, but it's like, oh, what if I click on something, there's progressive disclosure, I can open something up. It was intended to be multimedia rich. So unlike PowerPoint where you can, limited to sort of text and images, you can embed entire website into Gamma. And we wanted an ability to bring together many different work artifacts into that same medium. Certainly for like product managers and designers, over time they might just have different tools, and we may not end up being a core need for them, and maybe they're just vibe coding everything, and that's okay. But obviously that's a very small sort of subsection of like all the sort of professionals out there, knowledge workers, business professionals. We think for them, a lot of what we're building is still going to be hopefully universally useful, and so it's more like bringing that future state to them and trying to do that thoughtfully.
Hey, Grant, Mahesh Ram, nice to see you here. So question for you is, you talked about habits. What AI products or tools do you use that have become habits for you that you can't do without, number one? And number two, how are you challenging your team to incorporate more AI workers into their own daily routine? What are you doing to stimulate that?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's currently nothing too non-obvious. The note takers, being able to do that. I'm in a variety of meetings. Context switching is incredibly hard, and so having a place where you can dump some of that knowledge, whether you're using Granola or Notion, like there's a lot of different tools that I constantly try to experiment with. ChatGPT, Claude, like no-brainer. You should be using that as almost like a second brain or a sparring partner. A lot of the content creation I'm doing is the ability to like brainstorm and then like riff on ideas and like kind of explore the edges of ideas. For our company, we're currently in the stage where, anytime you're going through this sort of transitionary period, you need to, storm before you norm, which is like you want to have everybody explore broadly. Like you don't want to be prescriptive. Like not everybody has to use Cursor. Not everybody has to use Claude Code. Choose tools that feel right for you. Share that as often as you can. We do workshops where someone that's really deep into Claude Code will actually show exactly how they're using it with all the other engineers. And then we can sort of, pick their brain, like why, how are you doing this, what's useful, and then compare. I think over time we might converge on probably a more limited set of tools, but today it's way too early. The best you can do is encourage it. For us, like this value of like transparency and show and tell, like just do that as often as possible. And hopefully if you have a team that is inherently growth minded, they're going to be naturally gravitating towards it and pulling into the workforce. So we're trying to do that on a lead by example sort of thing.
My question to you is, when you think about the architecture and technology that makes up the product, are you already thinking about different kind of workloads that you will have to prepare for? They are going to be a little different from single user workflows and so on. So are you actively thinking about those things? And if so, maybe just comment on that.
Yeah, I'd say we are actively thinking about it, but it's more of a maybe 80-20 or like 90-10, where we feel like we're still so early in just trying to solve for the end user. Like nothing matters if we're not providing delight to the end user, right? So like if we felt like our job was done there, then yeah, maybe we go on and figure out scaling, workspace, permissioning, all these other things are coming. For sure we're working on the background here, but our job is like so far from being done on the end user level that is going to be the lion's share of like every ounce of like how you're thinking about product, the roadmap, the things you prioritize. So we're still focused there. That's still where the vast majority of our energy goes to.
All right, amazing. Grant, thank you so much. The amount of wisdom you packed in an hour was just insane, so I really appreciate it. I know you have to bounce very quickly. Thank you for coming all the way from East Bay. Like, come on, guys. Our speaker is coming to East Bay. You was in SF, but there's still a lot of commute. So thank you so much for being so kind and gracious in accepting the invite, and I can't wait to do this again. And thank you for being a champion of startups, as well as like please continue sharing these nuggets with us. Thank you so much.
Just maybe one quick note.
Yes.
Thank you. I mean, this community is awesome. Thank you for bringing the community together. Going back to where I started, which is I am here because I definitely want to be helpful. I know how hard the startup journey is, and so please reach out, stay in touch. I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on X. If there's anything I can do to be helpful, let me know. I am cheering you on. Again, I want to be your biggest cheerleader, so yeah, let me know how I can help.
Two housekeeping things for me. One last question, sorry, Grant. If you're hiring, you have 60 plus roles.
Yeah.
Can you share more how they should?
So we are hiring across the board. Go-to-market, engineering, product design. So whether it's you or your friends, colleagues, anybody that wants to come take a look, we're always looking to meet the very best. And so grateful for an introduction. Any sort of referral there would be greatly appreciated.